Hi, and welcome to Three Questions with. Got my buddy Tom O'Hare with us from Get College Going. Hey, Tom, welcome to the show.
Kevin, how are you today? Thanks for having me back.
Hey, glad to have you on. So, Tom, I want to talk a little bit about the cost of a college education now, because like all things, the price just keeps going up. What are some of the things you're seeing with your clients when they think about the cost involved?
Well, first, they're somewhat naive in the sense that they don't really know what the cost is.
Wow.
It's a hard number sometimes to find on a school's website because it's buried in the financial aid and the student accounts section. So they're kind of sticker shocked, and they don't really understand that some schools may have a sticker price, but the reality is that the cost isn't really what the family's going to pay. As we were talking earlier, schools are looking at cutting their costs to be able to accommodate the families that are dealing with the pandemic, dealing with COVID-19, but also the reality that the general public is starting to look at college as to whether or not it's something they want to invest in. So I think schools are really going to start looking at being better at providing information about costs and helping families understand it.
So, Tom, what are some of the common pitfalls you see people make, mistakes they make, simply because they don't know any better?
Well, they go into the search process first without really knowing what the cost is going to be. And by that, I mean, if we compare higher education to purchasing a home, you don't go look for a house until you've talked to maybe the mortgage lender, maybe the realtor, maybe online to see what you can afford. What is your budget going to accommodate? It doesn't happen in higher ed. In higher ed, there's still, as we've talked about before, the notion of, looking before you understand how much it's going to cost is still the current, I call it the hope and dream process. I hope I can find a school. I hope I can pay. I dream I can get in. So a real strong pitfall is that for the most part, people don't do a true analysis of what they can afford before they go looking at schools. Now, that's not to say they shouldn't look at a variety of schools, because most definitely they do. But understanding whether we can afford a net cost of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, that's going to give somebody a better perspective on looking at the reaches and really falling in love, or looking at tier 2 and tier 3 schools that they can afford and be just as successful.
That's a great analogy because I see that a lot too, where like you said, when you go out and you look at a $70,000 car, when you can afford a $30,000 car, it's going to be hard to compare apples to apples later on and stuff. So are there any other common mistakes you see people make, Tom?
Well, they're chasing schools that there are too many people applying to. We read, families read the U.S. News and Report, and they see the top 20 schools in the country, and we've got to have our student in there because that's the only school they're going to get a good job when they come out of. And that's not necessarily true. There are a lot of schools that are in New England, in the Mid-Atlantic, very close to us, might take a couple hours to get there, that students surely should be looking at from the standpoint of balancing their choices, balancing their options that can be affordable and still get done in 4 years, get a good job, launched into their career, and move forward. So I think that families sometimes get sucked into the keeping up to the Joneses and only apply to those schools that they may be thinking are the best to go to.
So, Tom, I got one follow-up question today. One of the things I've seen happen is people make an assumption that they won't qualify for financial aid. Tom, we make good money. We're never going to qualify. Should everyone apply for financial aid? Is there any downside to it?
There's no downside. I don't believe there is any downside because number one, if you want your child to have some skin in the game, and a minimum, take out a small student loan, they have to apply for financial aid. They have to have that application in the process. But today it's very competitive. Schools are very, very much hunting and competing for students, and they're going to be offering various types of aid packages. And if you don't apply, you don't know. Now, if a family is in the $500,000 income sphere and they can afford it, chances are, even if they want their child to have some skin in the game, maybe that isolated example, they're not going to complete the financial aid forms. But everybody else should. the other unknown factor that people forget about is that financial aid, especially need-based aid, is based on the size of the family. So you can make $200,000 and have 6 people in the family and one child going to college with another one on the way and qualify for aid. But in reality, income drives it. So income's going to drive it. I think the other thing that sometimes people get sucked into and get a little bit misguided is when it comes to their assets. Assets really do not play a major key in the calculation of someone's need-based aid, financial aid, unless they're looking at maybe a private school that is going to look at home equity. Right? So completing the financial aid form is critical. And right now, Kevin, 43% of the eligible population that could complete a financial aid form haven't done it.
Wow.
So does that mean they're not going to go to college? Which, okay, that's not a bad thing if they don't want to go. But if they want to go or are thinking about going and they haven't completed the financial aid, how are they going to base their decision from a financial standpoint if they don't have the application in the system?
Makes perfect sense. So Tom, how can people reach out to you? How can I learn more?
They can get a hold of me at getcollegegoing.com. You can call me on that thing called a telephone, 617-240-7350. Check me out on Facebook. And also, take advantage of the New England B2B networking group and the publications that you put out and the material you put out.
Tom, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to jump on the show. And as always, thanks for being my friend.
Thank you for having me.